Something goes wrong at work. Your first thought is, what did I do? A friend seems distant. You immediately replay the last conversation, searching for the moment you said something wrong. A relationship ends. You spend months, sometimes years, cataloging everything you could have done differently, everything you should have seen, every way in which you were insufficient or difficult or too much or not enough. Someone is upset. You assume it is because of you, even when there is no evidence that it is. Someone is quiet. You scan your recent behavior for the cause. A plan falls through, a situation deteriorates, something breaks, and somewhere reliably, the voice surfaces. This is my fault. Not sometimes, not occasionally, every time, as the first response, before any evidence is examined. As a reflex, not a conclusion. If this is familiar, if you recognize this pattern not as something you do occasionally, but as the automatic default orientation of your mind toward difficulty, then this video is going to say something important to you. Not to validate the belief that everything is your fault. The opposite, to help you understand where that belief came from, what it was originally for, and why it is costing you far more than it is protecting you. Because that voice, the one that says everything is your fault, was not born with you. It was built in a specific environment, by specific experiences, in response to specific needs that existed when you were very young and very dependent, and had very few tools for navigating the world around you. Understanding how it was built is the first step toward deciding whether you want to keep living inside it. Let's start at the beginning. Children are meaning-making creatures. From the earliest age, the brain works to create coherent narratives from experience, finding patterns, building maps, developing models that allow for prediction and therefore safety. When a child grows up in an environment where caregivers are critical, unpredictable, or emotionally absent, where love feels conditional, where approval must be earned, the meaning-making brain faces a problem. Something is wrong. The environment feels unsafe. There is tension, silence, criticism, withdrawal. And the child's brain, working with the information available and the cognitive tools of a child, arrives at an explanation. An explanation that is logical given the child's position in the world, even though it is wrong. The explanation is, it is my fault. Here is why the brain chooses this explanation, specifically, because the alternative is more terrifying. If the problem is me, if my parent is unhappy because of something I did, if I can identify the cause and correct it, then I have agency. I can do something. I can be better, behave differently, try harder, need less, be quieter, be more helpful, anticipate the mood, and adjust to it. The situation is within my control. If the problem is not me, if my parent is unhappy for reasons that have nothing to do with me, if the instability in my environment is coming from an adult who has their own wounds, their own struggles, their own problems that I cannot influence or predict, then I am powerless. I am a small person in a world that is unstable for reasons I cannot affect. And that is a terror that the developing mind will almost anything to avoid. So the mind chooses fault. It chooses responsibility. Not because the child is self-punishing by nature, because fault, paradoxically, feels safer than powerlessness. If I am the problem, at least I know where the problem is. At least there is something I can do. This adaptation was not a failure. It was a genuine survival strategy, maintaining some sense of control in a world where control was unavailable, preserving attachment to caregivers, making the world legible even if the narrative was wrong. But survival strategies are contextual. What works in the environment that produces them does not always work in every environment that follows. And the child who learned that assuming fault was a way of managing an unpredictable world grows into an adult who still uses that tool. Not because the world is still unpredictable in the same way, but because the tool is now automatic. The pattern runs beneath conscious choice. It fires before the evidence is examined. And in adult life, that pattern has a particular set of costs. The first cost is relational. The person who assumes everything is their fault tends to over-apologize, over-explain, and over-accommodate in relationships. They take responsibility for other people's moods, feelings, and choices in ways that are not accurate and not healthy. For them, or for the other person. They become hypervigilant to signs of displeasure, constantly reading the emotional temperature of the room and adjusting themselves to manage it. This is exhausting. It is also a form of control, a way of trying to keep the relationship safe by ensuring that nothing they do could possibly be the source of a problem, which is both impossible and distorting. The second cost is to self-perception. A person who interprets all difficulty through the lens of personal fault develops a distorted relationship with their own history. Failures are evidence of inadequacy rather than information. Difficult relationships were ruined by their own deficiencies rather than by the complexity of two people who were not compatible or who were both struggling. The story of the self becomes organized around a central, unexamined premise. I'm the one who causes problems. That premise shapes everything. How much risk you take, how honest you are about your own needs, whether you allow yourself to ask for what you want, or whether you manage yourself small enough that you won't be the cause of any friction. Whether you can receive love without immediately analyzing what you must be doing wrong to deserve it. The third cost is the loss of accurate perception. When everything is automatically your fault, you lose access to the possibility that other people have their own struggles and reasons for behaving the way they do that have nothing to do with you. You lose the ability to hold someone accountable for their behavior toward you, because your default frame already assigns the responsibility to yourself. The belief acts as a filter that screens out anything contradicting it. Now let's talk about what change looks like, because naming the pattern is only useful if it leads somewhere. The first and most important shift is recognizing the difference between responsibility and fault. They are not the same thing, and conflating them is at the heart of this pattern. Responsibility is the capacity to respond, to acknowledge your role in a situation, to understand your contribution to an outcome, to make different choices going forward. It is grounded, specific, and functional. It asks, what part of this did I actually influence, and what can I learn from that? Fault is a moral verdict. It is totalizing. It does not ask what you contributed. It assigns you as the cause. It says, this happened because you are insufficient, because you failed, because the problem is you. Fault does not produce learning. It produces shame. And shame, unlike guilt, does not motivate change. It produces paralysis or self-punishment that changes nothing. The person who automatically assumes fault is not taking healthy responsibility. They are skipping past responsibility entirely and landing directly on shame before any actual assessment has occurred. Learning to ask what actually happened, to examine a situation with genuine curiosity rather than arriving at a conclusion before the examination begins, is the practice. It is not natural for a nervous system trained to assign fault as its first move. It requires deliberate interruption of the automatic response. It requires the willingness to sit with the discomfort of not knowing whose fault something is while the evidence is actually considered. The second shift is learning to locate other people's behavior in them rather than in yourself. When someone is upset, the first question is not what did I do? It is what is happening for them. People's emotional states come from their inner worlds, their histories, their current stressors. Your behavior can be a trigger, but it is rarely the complete explanation. Starting from the assumption that you are always the cause is not accuracy. It is a bias that distorts more than it reveals. The third shift is renegotiating the relationship with powerlessness that made fault feel necessary in the first place. At the core of this pattern is a very old terror, being a small person in an unstable world with no control over what happens. Fault was adopted as an alternative to that terror, but the terror was never addressed. It was covered by a belief that turned out to be false, that assuming responsibility for everything gives you control over anything. It is not. The world remains unpredictable regardless of how much you optimize yourself. Learning to be in an uncertain world without requiring that uncertainty to be your fault is not easy. It is the work of years. For many people, it benefits from therapeutic support, not because they're broken, but because rewiring a pattern installed before conscious memory requires more than information and willpower. It requires repeated, corrective experience of sitting in difficulty without defaulting to self-blame. It also requires grief, recognizing that the belief was a strategy, that you adopted it to survive an environment that was not safe, means recognizing what that environment cost you. That recognition deserves to be felt genuinely because the loss was real. On the other side of that grief is something most people carrying this pattern have never fully experienced: the spaciousness of not being the cause, of something going wrong and genuinely not knowing whose responsibility it is, and being okay in that not knowing, of a relationship ending and holding the complexity of two people, two histories, two sets of needs, without collapsing it into the verdict that you were the problem. That spaciousness is available. It does not mean refusing accountability. It means having a fair witness to yourself, applying the same standard of evidence to claims about your own culpability that you would apply to anyone else's. You would not convict someone else before examining the evidence. You deserve the same standard. Believing everything is your fault says something about your upbringing. It says that somewhere in the years when your mind was most plastic and most dependent, the world gave you reasons to adopt this belief. That the environment asked something of you that it should not have asked of a child. That you found a way to survive it that was genuinely intelligent, genuinely adaptive, and that is now genuinely costing you. It does not say that you're broken. It does not say that you are weak. It says that you were a child who needed to make sense of a world that was hard to make sense of, and you did the best you could with what you had. Now you have more, and you can make different sense of things. If this video spoke to something you recognize in yourself, please like it and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more honest conversations about the patterns that shape how we think and how we live. You were not born believing everything was your fault, and you do not have to keep living as if it is.